Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. It started with a gate, a gleaming smug blockade where my driveway used to be. Behind it, a war was brewing. Not with guns, but with deeds, forged signatures, and one woman's crusade to claim what was never hers. She picked the wrong man. This is the story of how I took it all back. I was halfway through my usual morning drive back from the feed store when I saw it, something shiny where there shouldn't have been anything at all. I slowed to a crawl as my truck approached the familiar gravel turnout that led from the county road to the entrance of my property. The turnoff I'd been using without issue for nearly 2 decades. And there it was, a fresh steel gate bolted into a pair of metal posts dug deep into the earth. Hung across it was a smug little sign in glossy red letters that read, "Private access, Willow Ridge residents only. Trespassers will be reported." I blinked, then laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, but because it was so damn absurd, I thought maybe I was seeing things. I parked my truck off the side of the road, got out, and walked right up to the gate. The thing was chained shut with a combination padlock. My name wasn't on the sign, but my land was on the other side. 10 acres of Arizona dust, sweat, and memory. Land my grandfather bought when half the state was nothing but coyote and mesquite. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found it. Willow Ridge HOA. I hadn't spoken to them before because I'd never had to. They were a newer subdivision built up on the edge of my southern property line maybe 4 years ago. Rows of taupe stucco homes with satellite dishes and surveillance cameras staring out like cold eyes. Cookie-cutter civilization. I'd made it clear early on that my land wasn't part of their jurisdiction. They hadn't bothered me until now. The line rang twice before someone picked up. Willow Ridge HOA, Karen Stafford speaking. The name hit like nails on a chalkboard. I'd heard of her. Neighbors talked, self-declared queen of rules and consequences. She once fined a guy for having a garden gnome visible from the street. "This is Tom Clayton," I said, keeping my tone flat. "I own the parcel on the east side of your development. Someone's put a gate across my driveway." A pause, then a syrupy voice. "Oh, Mr. Clayton, yes, we've made some upgrades to community security. That access road is now limited to residents only. I'm sure you understand. It's a matter of safety." I stared at the gate like it was daring me to curse. "Ma'am, that's my driveway, my property access. Been there for decades. It's not yours to block." Karen let out a condescending laugh. "Oh, I'm aware you've used it, but you see, that strip runs directly adjacent to our development entrance, and our board voted unanimously to restrict non-resident access. Surely, as a gentleman farmer, you can use your rear access trail through the woods. I believe that's a public right-of-way, isn't it?" That gentleman farmer line made my jaw twitch. I breathed in slowly through my nose. "The trail through the forest is 5 miles longer and half washed out. This road is on my deed, and I maintain it. You had no right to block it." Karen's tone dropped an octave, icy, and clipped. "Then feel free to file a complaint, Mr. Clayton. But until we receive a formal directive from the county, the gate stays. Good day." She hung up. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the wind and the buzzing of a few confused flies. Then I turned around, drove the long way home, bouncing along the rutted forest trail that scraped the undercarriage of my truck and kicked up enough dust to blot out the sun. That evening, I pulled out the original plat map and the deed my grandfather signed in 1974. The road was clearly marked, part of the parcel, owned, taxed, and maintained by my family for 50 years. I scanned it, attached it to a cease and desist letter I typed myself, and sent copies to the HOA, the county recorder's office, and the city attorney. I also filed a formal complaint with the local code enforcement office. The next morning, I drove back to the gate. Same padlock, same smug sign. But this time, I wasn't alone. My neighbor, Jeff Hampton, stood off to the side with a thermos in hand and a look of amused sympathy on his face. "I figured I'd find you here," he said, nodding at the gate. "Saw him putting it in around midnight. No permit posted, no markings, just some crew in unmarked trucks working fast." I clenched my jaw. "Did you get photos?" He handed me a printout. "Already emailed you copies. Time-stamped, too. One of the trucks had a decal, Cactus Barrier Systems, out of Mesa, run by Karen's nephew if I'm not mistaken." I muttered a quiet thanks and stared at the chain. This wasn't a mistake. It was a move, an opening shot. I didn't touch the gate, not yet. I had a habit of choosing my battles wisely, and when I fought, I made sure I had the law and a good lawyer at my back. A week later, I came back from town with a trailer full of feed and nearly rear-ended a concrete wall. The gate was gone, but only because it had been replaced with something far more permanent. Two freshly poured concrete pillars now flanked the entrance, thick as tree trunks with embedded rebar cores. Between them, a shiny set of black iron security gates had been installed, motorized, keypad-controlled, topped with ornamental spikes like something out of a country club. And of course, the sign was still there, now laser-etched into a metal plate bolted to one of the pillars. Willow Ridge, resident access only. I killed the engine and just stared at it for a moment. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles white. They had turned my driveway into a damn fortress. I stepped out, walked up to the gate, and tested it. Deadlocked. The keypad blinked a cheerful red at me like it was daring me to punch it. No buzz-in box, no number to call. Nothing. Just solid steel and concrete where my right-of-way used to be. I got back into the truck, reversed slowly, and pulled off to the shoulder. Then I called Karen Stafford. She picked up on the third ring. Willow Ridge HOA. It's Clayton. Mr. Clayton, she said smoothly. I assume you've seen the improvements. You mean the illegal concrete barrier blocking my access road? She clicked her tongue. That access road, as I've explained, is adjacent to community land and has been repurposed for secure traffic control. It was never officially deeded to you. Our legal review suggests it qualifies as a municipal easement. I almost laughed. You had your nephew pour concrete pillars onto private property based on a suggestion. It's not private property, she snapped. It's within the public right-of-way and was clearly unmarked. If you have concerns, I suggest taking them up with the county. I already did, and I've got the documents to prove otherwise. That shut her up for half a second. I hung up before she could start into whatever HOA gospel she had queued up next. Back at the house, I pulled the thick folder of records from the fireproof safe in my office. Original plats, signed deeds, maintenance logs, property tax assessments, county engineering correspondence, the works. My grandfather had bought that land in 1974, and 3 years later, he'd filed and recorded an easement revocation and private ownership claim for the access road in accordance with the county's subdivision development rules. He even had it maintained quarterly by the same road service that still sends me invoices today. The road was mine, legally, historically. Absolutely. I called up Angela Foster. She picked up before the first ring finished. Tell me you've seen it, I said. I saw it this morning on the way to court. Concrete pillars, right? That's not just arrogance. That's criminal trespass. And we're going to dismantle them brick by brick, legally, she said. Send me pictures and I'll start the process. We're going to file a cease and desist and an emergency injunction to force them to remove the barrier. But this just got escalated into felony territory. I sent her everything. Pictures, GPS coordinates, time-stamped witness photos from Jeff, the deed scans, the maintenance receipts. She started drafting the papers that same afternoon. The next day, Officer Marcus Reed showed up at my door. He stepped out of his cruiser, thumbs hooked on his belt. Heard you got your driveway stolen. Got something better, I said, handing him the folder. Receipts, property records, title chain. All clean. That road's been mine since Carter was president. Marcus whistled low. HOA claims it was public. Said they had the blessing of the county. I raised an eyebrow. From who? Casper, the friendly clerk. He chuckled. Well, that's the kicker. The name on their filing is Edward R. Stinson. I froze. You mean the clerk who died in 2017? Yeah. So, either he's been busy from beyond the grave, or something smells rotten. Marcus took the folder, promised to submit a report, but his hands were still tied for the moment. It's a civil dispute on paper. But if this thing's built on fake filings, that's another story. I nodded slowly. Then let's make it that kind of story. He gave me a look that said, you better be right, and left with the file. I stood there for a long moment, watching the dust settle behind his patrol car. That night, I got an email from Angela. She'd examined the HOA's deed reclassification submission from their earlier claim and flagged half a dozen red flags. The biggest one, the parcel number they cited didn't match my property. It matched an empty strip of county drainage land on the opposite side of Willow Ridge. The HOA had forged the paperwork, sloppily, boldly. And now, They'd poured $20,000 worth of concrete on the wrong man's land. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table with a fresh cup of black coffee and a full legal pad, listening to Angela's voice through the speakerphone. She'd barely slept. I could tell from the clipped tone and the rustle of paper on her end. They used the wrong parcel number, forged a dead man's signature, and filed it with a notary who, get this, lost their license last year for fraudulent certifications, she said. This isn't just incompetence. It's a goddamn fraud ring. I pinched the bridge of my nose. And they used that fake deed to justify pouring concrete across my driveway. Exactly. So we're not just looking at a civil trespass anymore. We're going after them for criminal forgery, fraudulent misrepresentation, and interference with private property rights. Tell me what to do. First, I'm filing a petition for an emergency injunction. I'll have it on a judge's desk by noon. Second, you're going to compile everything you've got. Witness statements, photos, maintenance bills, copies of your grandfather's easement filings. You'll need to sign an affidavit. I'll bring the paperwork over. 2 hours later, Angela pulled up in her old Subaru with 3 manila folders and a look of caffeinated determination. She spread the documents out across my kitchen table like a war map. This is what we're hitting them with, she said. Cease and desist, demand for removal, and an emergency petition for injunctive relief. I signed everything, carefully, deliberately. My pen etched each signature like a carving knife. Later that afternoon, I drove down to the county recorder's office with Angela. The clerk at the front desk was a young guy named Luis who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She handed over the documents with a smile. We're going to need these time-stamped and certified. Luis skimmed the first few pages, then looked up, blinking. Is this the Willow Ridge case? You've heard of it? He hesitated. We've been getting calls. Someone flagged their filings last week. There's chatter upstairs. Angela raised an eyebrow. Good. Keep the chatter going. Back at home, I was going through my email when Jeff Hampton called. Tom, he said without preamble, you might want to look at what just showed up on my porch. He wasn't the kind of man to panic, so I listened. I found a flyer in my mailbox. Says there's going to be a Willow Ridge security meeting at the HOA clubhouse tomorrow night. Topic: dealing with dangerous adjoining properties. I exhaled slowly. They're painting me as a threat. Sounds like it. There's even a picture of your truck. I didn't say much after that, just thanked him and hung up. That night, I decided to pay a visit to the site again, this time with a camera and a flashlight. The concrete had fully set. The keypad on the gate had a manufacturer's label, Ridgeguard Systems. I snapped photos of everything. Then I circled around to the back of the nearest Willow Ridge house. The homes sat like cardboard cutouts, tightly packed, each with the same landscaping and soulless patio lights. No one saw me, but I saw something else. One of the electrical conduits from the gate ran underground and popped up beside a utility box behind one of the model homes. I took more photos. The next day, Angela filed the injunction with the county superior court. The clerk there, a steely-eyed woman named Ramirez, stamped it with a hard thunk. "Let's see them ignore this," she muttered. That same afternoon, I got an email from a burner address. No name, no subject, just attachments. There were spreadsheets, payment records from the HOA, names, dates, dollar amounts, monthly road maintenance fees charged to Willow Ridge residents. The totals added up to over $70,000 across 2 years. And at the bottom of the file, the receiving account was listed under a company called Desert Civic Solutions, LLC. I Googled it. Owner, Douglas Stafford, Karen's husband. I stared at the screen in stunned silence, then called Angela. "They're stealing from their own residents," I said. "Then it's racketeering," she replied flatly. "We're going to bury them." 3 days later, we had the order in hand. A superior court judge reviewed the evidence and signed off on an emergency injunction. The language was crystal clear. The Willow Ridge HOA was to remove all barriers obstructing access to the privately owned road within 72 hours. Failure to comply would result in civil and criminal contempt charges. I read it twice, then a third time. The paper felt heavier than it should have, like it had absorbed the weight of everything I'd been hauling around for weeks. I called a local demolition crew I'd worked with before. Good guys, quiet, didn't ask questions when told they'd be cutting through concrete. They said they could be at the site by 8 a.m. the next morning. I emailed Marcus Reed a heads up. Then I slept for the first time in days without grinding my teeth. At 8:05 sharp, I pulled up in my truck with the court order in one hand and a thermos of black coffee in the other. The crew was already unloading a portable generator, angle grinders, and a jackhammer. A small group of HOA residents had gathered on the opposite side of the gate, eyeing us like we were filming a documentary on community betrayal. At 8:20, Karen herself showed up. Black sunglasses, clipboard, power walk strut. She looked like someone who thought she was going to win an argument with the federal government. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she barked, stepping between me and the workers. I held out the court order. "This legal directive from the Superior Court. You have 72 hours. I'm giving you 72 seconds. She took the paper, skimmed it, and actually laughed. "This is based on fraudulent information. You've been harassing us with bogus claims and—" "No," I said, cutting her off. "You've been trespassing, forging documents, and extorting your own community. Now get out of the way before you add obstruction of justice to your rap sheet." One of the younger guys on the crew fired up a saw. The squeal of the blade echoed across the desert. Karen took a step back. At 8:40, Officer Marcus Reed arrived, sunglasses on, calm as ever. "Everything okay here?" he asked. Karen rushed over to him like she was reporting a home invasion. "They're destroying HOA property. They're not authorized." Marcus raised a hand. "Ms. Stafford, I've reviewed the court order. Mr. Clayton is within his rights to remove the obstruction. I suggest you allow the process to proceed." She looked like she wanted to punch him. Instead, she folded her arms and turned to watch as the first cut was made into the base of the left pillar. By 9:30, the gates were lying in two twisted sections on a flatbed trailer. The concrete stubs looked like broken teeth. I stood with Marcus and Jeff Hampton, sipping coffee while the demolition crew swept up debris like it was just another Tuesday. "You sure she's not going to try this again?" Jeff asked. "She's too proud to give up," I said. "But she just lost the battle, and the court's watching." That afternoon, the real fireworks began. Karen filed a report accusing me of criminal destruction of community infrastructure. She emailed the mayor's office, the police chief, the local paper, anyone who'd listen. Claimed I had used intimidation tactics and militia threats. I didn't have time to laugh before the county's legal department called. "We've received some concerning claims from the HOA," the voice on the phone said cautiously. I sent them the court order, the property documents, the signed affidavits, and a copy of the video Marcus had taken at the scene. 2 hours later, I got a one-line email in response. "We consider the matter resolved. Please retain all records for future reference." That night, Karen started her next tactic, a smear campaign. Flyers appeared in mailboxes across Willow Ridge. "Danger at the property line. Know your neighbor." Beneath the headline was a photo of my face, cropped badly from a county fair photo from years ago, like she dug it out of a basement drawer. But the damage was already done, just not to me. A few residents reached out. One woman named Diane sent me a message through my website's contact form. "I had no idea this was your road," she wrote. "We were told the HOA built it." I replied with documents, links to the injunction, and a polite thank you. By the end of the week, the gate was gone. The signs were gone, but the battle wasn't. Karen was still holding meetings, still threatening legal action, still bluffing like a Vegas dealer on her last chip. But now, I had momentum, and a hell of a lot more allies than I did a month ago. It wasn't even a full week before I noticed the first camera, mounted just above the old utility pole near the southern edge of my property, facing downward. Clean, sleek, white casing, new. I hadn't put it there. I followed the cable. It ran across the pole, then disappeared underground in the direction of Willow Ridge. Not my wiring, not my equipment. Another step in Karen's playbook. I called Marcus. "They're surveilling your property line now," he said, exasperated. "Do they ever quit?" "I don't think she knows how." He promised to log it and advised me to take photos and send them to the city code office. I did. Then I took my ATV and did a full sweep along the boundary. That's when I found the second camera. Hidden better, this one had been nailed to a dead tree at the fence line, camouflaged with a few fake leaves. Again, pointed directly at my property. I pulled it down, drove it to the sheriff's substation, and dropped it off in a Ziploc with a note. "Unlawful surveillance on private property, courtesy of Willow Ridge HOA." The next morning, I got a call from Jeff. "You might want to see this," he said. He'd taken his morning walk earlier than usual, and while passing by the HOA clubhouse, spotted a group of residents huddled around Karen and someone he didn't recognize, a man in a blue suit with a branded briefcase. Jeff snapped a photo from behind a bush. The briefcase logo matched a private legal firm I'd heard of, McKenna and Doyle, infamous in the county for defending rich clients with deep pockets and a taste for legal brinksmanship. I forwarded the image to Angela. "If they're lawyering up, that's a good sign," she said. "Means they're cornered. They've already committed fraud. What could they possibly gain now?" Delay, confusion. A countersuit for harassment or defamation. It's Karen's last shot at controlling the narrative. But it got worse. That same afternoon, I received a notice taped to my mailbox. Notice of HOA assessment, unpaid fees. It was printed on Willow Ridge letterhead and claimed I owed over $2,000 for road maintenance, community security upgrades, and legal costs incurred due to resident disruption. I stood there, in the sun, rereading the page like it might vanish if I blinked hard enough. Then I walked inside and scanned it, read circles around the most absurd phrases, and forwarded it to Angela. Her response was immediate. "They're either completely unhinged or trying to bait you into a misstep. Whatever you do, don't respond directly. Let me handle it." The next day, Marcus came by unannounced. He looked more tired than usual. "I've got something," he said, stepping into my kitchen. "Remember that fake deed submission?" I had a friend at Records dig deeper. He pulled out a manila envelope and laid out copies of the HOA filing. The signature of Edward R. Stinson, the deceased clerk, had been lifted, literally from an old certificate scanned years ago. A perfect digital copy pasted onto a new document. "But here's the kicker," Marcus said. "They also submitted a survey map as part of their claim, except the date on the file. It's 2 years after Stinson died. So even their timeline is garbage," I muttered. "Not just garbage, it's criminal negligence at best. Maybe outright fraud." I sat down slowly. "Do we know who filed it?" Marcus nodded. "Douglas Stafford. Karen's husband." I almost laughed. "Of course." He looked serious. "I've got enough to start an official report for document fraud. Might take time, but once it's open, it's out of local hands." Meanwhile, HOA members had started asking questions. A few stopped by my place in the evenings, quietly, looking over their shoulders. One woman, Joanna, told me she'd paid nearly $4,000 over 2 years in road upkeep fees, but never received an invoice, just auto debits. When I showed her the ownership documents and the court order, her hands shook. "We were told this was all sanctioned, that you were just some squatter refusing to comply." I shook my head. "Your board's been lying to you." By Friday, 3 more residents had reached out. One forwarded a group email Karen had sent, instructing the board to tighten community discipline and neutralize the perimeter disruption. I forwarded everything to Angela. Her response was simple: "It's time to go federal." By Monday morning, Angela had submitted a full criminal complaint to the Arizona Attorney General's office. We included everything: forged documents, financial misappropriation, illegal surveillance, even the absurd fee notice they slapped on my mailbox. The complaint ran over 60 pages, packed with exhibits, timelines, and sworn affidavits. She titled the file, "Clayton vs. Willow Ridge HOA, Fraud, Trespass, Racketeering Allegations." It was a beautiful thing. At the same time, Marcus filed his own police report with the county sheriff, officially opening an investigation into Douglas Stafford and the alleged document forgery. That meant subpoenas, discovery, and a chain of custody analysis. It also meant that Karen and her HOA weren't just facing some angry landowner anymore. They were under official scrutiny. That afternoon, I noticed a marked shift in tone. The usual stream of passive-aggressive HOA flyers stopped. Their email campaigns went quiet. No more dangerous neighbor rumors. No more gatewatch meetings. Just silence. Too quiet. I was at my workshop fixing a fence latch when I heard tires crunch on the gravel. A white sedan pulled up. Government plates. 2 agents stepped out. One was from the Arizona Department of Real Estate. The other was from the Office of the Inspector General. They introduced themselves, showed ID, and politely asked if they could walk the property line with me. I gave them the tour, showed them where the gate had been, where the cameras had been mounted, where the wiring still peeked through the fence post. They took dozens of photos, asked precise questions, and jotted notes like they were piecing together a crime scene. When we got back to my porch, the younger agent asked, "Did you ever receive any formal communication from Willow Ridge HOA about road ownership or maintenance prior to the barrier?" "Not a damn word," I said. "They acted first and forged later," he nodded. "That matches what we're seeing." As they left, the older one turned and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Clayton. This isn't going to be swept under the rug." The following day, subpoenas hit the HOA board like a thunderclap. Karen, her husband Douglas, the treasurer, the secretary, and 2 members of the Architectural Review Committee all were served. Witnesses later told me Karen looked like someone had pulled the earth out from under her. By the end of the week, a whistleblower from inside the HOA sent Angela a flash drive via courier, encrypted, anonymous, but genuine. Inside were internal emails, thread after thread of board conversations, meeting transcripts, and budgets. One subject line caught my eye: reimbursement plan for barrier construction, contingency, legal blowback. Karen had prepared for this. She knew it was illegal. She'd just bet on no one fighting back hard enough. One email was time-stamped 3 days before the concrete was poured. Karen had written, "Once the gate is up, he'll either cave or sue, and we'll drown him in process. We control the board. He's one man." I printed that one out and taped it to the fridge. Meanwhile, the press had caught wind. First, a blurb in a local blog, then a radio segment, then a full article in the Arizona Sentinel. HOA president under fire for blocking private property access. Alleged fraud. The photo showed the demolished gate, my truck parked triumphantly. Beside it, residents started organizing. Joanna, now fully disillusioned, put together a petition demanding Karen step down and held a meeting in her own backyard. Over 40 people showed up. Jeff went too. Said it felt more like a support group for HOA trauma survivors than a homeowners meeting. They weren't just angry, they were embarrassed, betrayed. They wanted answers. Angela filed a motion to freeze HOA bank accounts under suspicion of misappropriation. The judge approved it within 48 hours. Karen's power base began to crack. Some of her most loyal supporters, board members who'd once echoed every ridiculous rule, started lawyering up for themselves. By the end of the week, the treasurer had signed a cooperation agreement with investigators. Karen was cornered. But cornered animals? They don't surrender. They bite. The sheriff's cruiser pulled into my driveway just before dawn on a Saturday. I was already awake, standing at the stove with a skillet full of eggs and a mind full of worst-case scenarios. Marcus stepped out, his expression unreadable. "You'll want to come with me," he said. "They're executing the search warrants this morning." I grabbed my coat and followed without a word. By the time we reached Willow Ridge, the sun had just begun to crack over the rooftops. Sheriff's deputies were already spread across the HOA clubhouse lawn, yellow tape stretching across the parking lot like a warning banner. A forensic van idled nearby, and plainclothes investigators moved in and out of the building with sealed boxes. Karen was standing at the clubhouse entrance, arguing with a deputy. Her robe was silk, her hair perfect, and her rage volcanic. She was shouting something about attorney-client privilege and private board business when I stepped out of the cruiser behind Marcus. Her eyes locked onto me like crosshairs. "You!" she snarled, jabbing a manicured finger in my direction. "You set this up. This is harassment. You'll be hearing from my lawyer." Marcus calmly showed her the signed warrant. "Ms. Stafford, this is a legal operation. You may direct complaints to the county court. In the meantime, you'll need to step aside." She didn't, so they gently moved her aside. Inside the clubhouse, the scene was clinical. Investigators were cataloging files, computers, printed statements. The financial records Angela had flagged were being verified in real time. One of the agents pulled me aside to confirm a few addresses listed on HOA reimbursement forms. Some were legitimate, others vacant lots, non-existent contractors. The fraud was deeper than we thought. Douglas Stafford was picked up at his office in Scottsdale 2 hours later, arrested on charges of document forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit theft. The press was already on it by the time he was in cuffs. A swarm of reporters had descended on Willow Ridge, broadcasting live from the scene, narrating the downfall of a once smug neighborhood autocrat. Angela called me as I stood outside the clubhouse, watching deputies load the last box into an unmarked van. "Karen's been indicted," she said. 21 counts: fraud, forgery, misuse of HOA funds, obstruction, criminal trespass. The DA is pushing for maximum sentencing. I closed my eyes and let the desert breeze wash over me. Later that afternoon, I joined Joanna and Jeff at a community meeting, this time in the local high school gymnasium hosted by the temporary HOA Oversight Committee. It wasn't formal yet, but the county had stepped in and assigned provisional authority to a resident-elected board. Karen was effectively ousted. The mood was tense but hopeful. People were angry, confused, betrayed, but they weren't paralyzed. They asked real questions, demanded real answers. Several residents apologized to me in person. A few even asked if I'd considered joining the temporary board. I declined politely. I'd had enough HOA politics for a lifetime. 2 days later, Marcus stopped by again. "She pled not guilty," he said, "but between you, me, and the county prosecutor, she's cooked." I nodded. "What's the timeline?" "Trial's scheduled for 6 months out, but the judge just approved pre-trial detention, flight risk. She's not going home." He handed me a copy of the indictment. It was thick, ugly, and satisfying. I tucked it into the folder with all the others, the growing archive of Karen Stafford's greatest hits. By the end of the week, more details came out. The fraudulent Desert Civic Solutions account used for the fake road fees had over $110,000 siphoned from residents. The IRS got involved. Angela started coordinating with federal investigators to make sure no loophole would save Karen. I walked the access road that evening, boots crunching against the gravel. No gates, no cameras. Just 10 acres of peace again. Then I saw it. 2 of the younger residents from Willow Ridge standing at the edge of their development, nervously holding a folded piece of paper. They waved me over. "Mr. Clayton," one of them said, "we just wanted to say thank you. We really didn't know what was happening. We thought the road belonged to the HOA." I nodded. "You weren't the first." The other man held out the paper, a petition already full of signatures. "We want the new board to officially recognize the road as yours and put a permanent clause in the bylaws. No more encroachments. Ever." I signed it right there on the hood of my truck. And as I did, I realized something. Karen might have built herself a little empire of gates, lies, and concrete, but she'd forgotten the one rule you never break out here. You don't mess with a man's land. 6 months later, the courtroom was packed. Karen sat at the defendant's table, her once pristine hair now dulled, her posture no longer that of a woman in charge. The smugness had drained from her expression like the color from her cheeks. Douglas sat behind her, stone-faced, already facing his own upcoming trial. Her lawyer, a wiry man in an ill-fitting suit, looked like he was regretting every minute of this case. I sat 2 rows back alongside Angela, Jeff, and half a dozen Willow Ridge residents. Joanna was there too, clutching a copy of the new HOA charter like it was a rosary. The trial lasted 8 days. The prosecution laid everything out. The forged documents, the misuse of HOA funds, the fabricated maintenance invoices, the fake contractor accounts, the illegal surveillance equipment, the harassment campaigns, and the massive lie about road ownership. Each piece clicked into place like the tiles of a mosaic, one that painted a portrait of entitlement, arrogance, and criminal fraud. The defense had nothing but bluster. They tried to claim Karen had acted in good faith, confused by outdated documents. They claimed the money was earmarked for future infrastructure. They even tried to argue that I had intimidated board members by swinging tools threateningly, a claim so absurd it drew actual laughter from the gallery. On the final day, the jury returned in less than 2 hours. Guilty. All 21 counts. The judge, a firm but fair woman with a gravel voice and no patience for HOA tyranny, didn't waste time. "Ms. Stafford," she said, "you abused your authority, violated private property, and manipulated an entire community for personal gain. This court sentences you to 21 years in prison with no possibility of parole for the first 15. Karen didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just slumped like a puppet with its strings cut. Outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed. I didn't say much, just enough to make clear that private property still meant something in this country. Then I shook Angela's hand, hugged Jeff, and drove home. When I turned onto the access road, I saw it waiting there, newly installed, freshly bolted into the post. A black metal sign, clean and direct. Private road, owned by T. Clayton. Trespassers will be prosecuted, not maintained or governed by any HOA. Next to it, a second sign, hung by county order, complete with an official seal. This road is protected by superior court order. Unauthorized modifications are illegal. Violators will be prosecuted. I smiled. A few feet ahead, a group of Willow Ridge residents were gathered near the old gate site. Someone had brought cupcakes. Kids were running around. Jeff waved me over and shouted, "Guess who got elected to the new oversight committee?" I parked the truck and walked up. They clapped. A woman I didn't know offered me a plate. "We owe you," she said. I looked at them, all gathered in the sunlight. Neighbors who used to think of me as some cranky loner at the edge of civilization. Now they saw me for what I was, the only one who'd stood up when it mattered. As dusk fell, I drove the road one more time. No gates, no lies, just gravel, mesquite, and the piece of reclaimed land. The wind had finally changed.